We went through basically a short-term analysis here in terms of what can be done uh, using the existing conditions, using the existing infrastructure. Our study is an operational study. It's not looking to build new infrastructure. It's not looking to radically change the resources, though it does consider adding resources. We're really looking at ridership-driven alternatives, and we're looking at the employment market and the market pattern, and basically also to understand the existing conditions. Currently, the line is using 3 equipment sets every day for service, providing 12 round trips or 24 trips each day. That includes time for servicing and inspections, and when you account for that time, the 24 trains a day is fully utilizing the 3 equipment sets. So any additional service will require additional equipment to be applied for the line. There are minor variations between weekday and weekend schedules to look for supporting weekday commuting options, and obviously to look for some weekend leisure travel options focused a little bit differently. There's a single track connection with the Northeast Corridor, and coordination is required with Amtrak and SEPTA on operations on the corridor. This is a diagram of the line in New Jersey. You can see it's mostly a single track line. 86% of the right-of-way within New Jersey is single track, with a number of passing sidings where trains and operating in opposing directions can meet to allow them to operate at the same time. The terminal Atlantic City also serves as a yard and a servicing location. There's not a separate servicing location for equipment, nor is there a separate yarding location. So some terminal capacity is tied up over the course of the day for those functions as well. And this particular alignment with the sidings where they're located was developed to support the original service when the line was reopened in the 80s, when it was a combined service with Amtrak and New Jersey Transit. So it was somewhat designed to support a specific service plan when it was laid out. So as a background, we looked at pre-COVID ridership levels as our baseline. We're not in a position yet to have a full understanding of what a post-COVID new normal might be. So right now we're using pre-COVID ridership levels as our baseline. We've also got recent employment and market pattern studies that we've accounted for, a variety of studies, both done by NJ Transit and others, that provide us with data for ridership use, potential riders based on the commuter shed around the line and employment. We're also accounting for the fact that there's an ongoing study of a station to be added at the Atlantic City Airport. So we've accounted for that in our operating plans as we develop various options moving forward. And with that in mind, we're looking at what's possible using the existing infrastructure, and we're assuming that there are adequate human and equipment resources available to support their near-term added services, and that seems to be the case that there are. So we examined a number of options. We looked at creating maybe an express service for a limited number of express trains. We looked at that both in place of an existing train where we move stops off an existing train, or we looked at it slotting in a new train into the service. We also looked to maintain or expand the service focused on the peak travel markets for the typical office workday or normal workday, whether that be 8 to 4, 9 to 5, in those time frames. And we looked at expanding the service day, having trains operate earlier in the morning or later into the evening and night as options to change the service. We also looked at having more dense service in the evening or more dense service in the midday by adding a train or two here or there. And we looked at the times of the largest casino shifts. We got information from the Casino Association, so we could look at either adjusting existing trains or adding new trains to support those larger shifts. If you want to serve both the Philadelphia peak travel market as far as work shifts and the Atlantic City shifts, it's important to add existing equipment to the service, as the time requirements of both don't allow you to do both with the three sets of equipment. So at least a fourth set of equipment is needed. We've also looked in combination with all these options about whether this might start as a seasonal service or some of it might operate as a seasonal service, because ridership on the Atlantic City line is significantly higher during the summer and surrounding weeks around the summer season than it is in the off season. And we looked at possibly starting service at other locations where most of it now originates out of Atlantic City and then operates between Philadelphia and Atlantic City. We looked at maybe originating equipment out of Philadelphia or short-term locations such as Lindenwold or Winslow Junction, where we might start a trip in the middle of the line. In looking at the most feasible options that we found in going in these various directions, we can see that an evening service addition is something that looks workable. We're also able to increase the focus on casino shifts while retaining the peak Philadelphia trips. We've also got some options that allow us to expand later trains in the evening as well as earlier trains in the morning, and we've also looked at a midday expansion. Generally, each of these options is generally adding about a round trip and respacing service. Some of the options can be combined, so you can add multiple options. There are others, particularly an example, the midday and the evening are a challenge because combining those two has an effect on your ability to fuel equipment and service equipment throughout the day. So some can be combined well, some don't combine quite as well as others. Some of the things that we found more challenging or more challenged was the express service option. It had a limited benefit because the stops on the line are spread out. Dropping stops doesn't have as much impact on runtime as it does when you have closely spaced stations. And basically saw that with the single track alignment, if we did take the stops off or some stops off, trains might save some time through a line segment, but then they get to the siding and have to wait for the opposing train. And that ate into some of the time savings of taking the stops off. So it really came out in a judgment there that it didn't seem beneficial to forego the service at their intermediate stops. There wasn't enough benefit to the endpoint riders in terms of travel time savings. And of course, when you take stops off, you're eliminating an opportunity to serve that intermediate community along the line. We also did not find that starting the trips at midpoint locations on the line was that beneficial. While you could identify slots that would work, the logistics of getting the equipment in position and getting it back for servicing created other challenges, and we just felt that the benefit of providing service over the entire line outweighed the challenges of starting equipment at a different location. And of course, if we were actually going to store equipment overnight in an intermediate location for a morning start, there was also the security issue of making sure the equipment was guarded and safe, and the crews would have the equipment they needed when they started their day at that location. So all of the options have some challenges, even the ones that work well. There's just an issue with rail system capacity and operation reliability. The more service you add on a line, particularly a single track line, the more challenging it becomes to operate an on-time service and a reliable service. The Atlantic City line also has somewhat of a challenge of having two movable bridges on the line, one in Atlantic City and one across the Delaware River, that when those bridges open can disrupt the service. So again, when you add more service on the line, you get more challenges in terms of maintaining a reliable pattern. One of the other challenges that we're seeing nationwide and hearing from all of our clients nationwide is determining what the long-term travel patterns are going to be post-COVID. We mentioned that earlier, but right now in terms of how many days a week people may commute to their office, how people may travel for recreation versus doing things online, such as online gambling. All of those things are things to be determined and get better feel for as we get farther into the history of this situation we've been dealing with. And all options require added financial and operational resources. Any service that is added to the line requires additional human resources in terms of train crews and servicing employees, as well as, of course, financial assets to pay those folks and to pay for the fueling and everything else for the equipment. So moving forward, it'll be important to identify potential funding sources if there is a decision made to move forward with some of these options, and also to verify the availability of the train crews, the cars and locomotives, and maintenance staffing. One way to move forward with this might be to do a step-by-step of adding one option at a time and seeing how it goes, adding service in stages, and see how that works out. So our next steps for our study are simply to develop more refined ridership forecasts for select options, refine the operating plans a little bit more for select options. We're working with NJ Transit right now on further defining the operating costs of options, and of course, eventually to determine funding sources if NJ Transit moves forward with the added service. And we will be issuing a final report later this year. So that is our little bit of a quick overview of our study, and obviously now maybe we can open up the floor to questions on both presentations here.
Thank you for both those presentations. Does anyone here have any questions? On the Atlantic City Rail study, what's the timeline for the next phase?
I think we're hoping to have the report done in the fall. There's Lou, you may want to jump in on some efforts. There have been meetings with stakeholders, and we're looking to get other feedback from potential riders. But Lou, I'll let you discuss that perhaps more than appropriate than me discussing it.
Sure, Tom. I'm getting a network performance error, so I'm going to leave my camera off. Hopefully you could all hear me. We're nearing the end of this study, and as Tom indicated, we're looking for feedback from folks. We're trying to work a little bit of magic with this line. The Atlantic City line is a long, primarily single-track rail line. It's a line that we inherited. We actually inherited it in a recently abandoned state back in the early 80s. At the time, it was hosting, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 one-car trains a day. It was a very little operation. And as a single track line, we try to squeeze as much out of it as we can, but you got to work a little bit of magic because there are meeting points for trains. As Tom indicated, there are drawbridges. If the bridge goes up and the train is delayed, that means it's going to be delayed getting to its meeting point with the other train, delaying that train. So there's a little bit of a dance we have to do to make this all work, which means that trying to find opportunities to change the service, you've got to work all that into it. We've got 2 things going on right now with regard to the line. The one is the completion of this study. The other is we are cooperating with SJTA on a jointly funded study of the potential for a new station in Pomona to serve the Atlantic City Airport. It's a feasibility study. That study is also proceeding. So the Atlantic City line is keeping us busy. Something that would help us now, though, Tom indicated that there are different options. We can't do everything because of the constraints on this line, but we have some possibilities for either adding late night or very late night service, or reconfiguring the service in the middle of the day. And what we haven't really been getting from the stakeholders is a preference. What is the most important? I don't know if Tom, if it's still possible to share your screen, but you had that slide that showed the different types of alternatives. Is it possible to bring that back up? Sorry, I know I'm kind of hitting you out of the blue with this, but if it's possible, it might be good to have that slide up again. It's the slide that talks about the different alternatives. I will give Tom a chance to bring that slide up. Yeah, the feasible options. So, if you look at the bullets there, and thanks, Tom, we've got some different possibilities. Uh, I would love to hear from the TAC folks if there's anything that really stands out to you as, yeah, that is really something we need, or conversely, if there's something that seems like it isn't worthwhile, please let us know. That's why we do these things.
I think, is anyone from Atlantic County want to have any insight on that? I'll yield the floor to Atlantic County, but.
Hi, this is Renee from Atlantic County. I'm just being brought up to speed on a lot of the planning issues and things like that. I mean, I'm sure we would have some comments. I want to take a look further at this and maybe give you some feedback.
And Renee, and don't, I wasn't trying to put anyone on the spot per se.
Oh no, not at all. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Lou, I'm sure this was discussed at some point when you guys informed us about the initial study, but what was the thought process in terms of just looking at operational improvements and not including in the scope of work, potential infrastructure improvements?
We've looked at the infrastructure improvements in the past. We know what they are. We know that at the time we looked at them, in today's costs, they would probably exceed $200 million. And that level of funding has not been forthcoming. And those costs came before the supply chain issues that we are now seeing everywhere. So I suspect that those costs would be higher now. So the thought process was, considering the changed travel market, Atlantic City line has been a very dynamic market. The casino industry has changed, and of course now, sort of post-COVID, travel patterns have changed a bit. Trying to understand what the market needs. When do they need the trains? And seeing what is possible using the existing infrastructure so that it could be implemented sooner. The major capital improvement projects all come with a long timeline. And the idea here was what can be done in the short to medium term.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lou, had you given it any consideration to actually putting out like a Google survey or something that would help sort of rank these options? Obviously, you're not getting a lot of feedback right now because sometimes some of these people on the line this is the first time they're seeing this presentation.
Yeah, the complication we have is that there's another Atlantic City line survey going on as part of our routine surveying of the rail lines. So we're trying to figure out a way we could do so without overburdening people and sending a confused message.
Understood. Thank you. Let us know how we might be able to help. If you create a survey and you're looking for stakeholders, we can certainly help with that and share any kind of social media you might have as well.
We will. It might be that we might, just for the sake of separating the efforts, we might let a little time pass and then come back to this again, just so that we don't confuse folks. And it's not a huge ridership base. Sometimes people don't appreciate if you ask if they want to participate in a survey and then come back again, a few weeks later and ask them to do a different survey. Then they get angry.
Lou, I did have a question. I don't know whether this is for Leslie or for Michael, maybe just for you. What kind of outreach have you done in terms of sharing the transit uh, planning friendly guide, the transit friendly planning guide with, let's say, Hamilton or Buena or some of the stations that are specific to or bus stops in in the SJ.
I'm going to start with a response, and I'm going to turn it over to Michael and Celeste. We are at the beginning of outreach. This is a new product, and it's available online. It's accompanied by other uh, data applications and goodies that we put together and provide. So what we're doing is getting the word out. So we're at the beginnings of that. So that's why we're talking to the MPOs and others. But I'm going to turn it over now to Michael and Celeste, and I'm going to mute my mic so that we don't get feedback.
Thank you, Lou, and great question, Jennifer. Sorry.
Feedback in.
We're all in a room now.
There we go. Apologies. Yes, so as Lou said, we are starting what we're calling the roadshow, which is to get the guide out to communities to make sure that everyone's aware of it. So we are hoping to get actual print copies out to communities, as well as attend any meeting where we're welcome to kind of present how the tool can, or excuse me, the guide can help communities across the state. So we will be presenting at the New Jersey County Planners meeting in October, and then hopefully find opportunities to present at a more municipal, local level too in the near term.
And we've presented for TMAs, and we presented at the transaction conference, so hopefully we reach some folks there. But if you all have any presentations in mind, any groups that you might think could benefit from this presentation or from the guide, please reach out and let us know.
Yes, because we feel like it's a really great resource, but now is the task of getting, the word out to people across the state.
Yeah, I say I'm not.
We've also promoted it through
ahead.
NJTOD. Oh, sorry.
You're okay. Go ahead.
Through our newsletter. So if you all have newsletters or email lists, that'd be another way.
Yeah, no, that was exactly what I was going to say. What I was going to say was I'm not the public outreach planner, and so I think our next newsletter is in September. That might be full,
Okay.
but I think Melissa does it quarterly. So if you have an article that you wanted to sort of share, and Melissa can sort of look at that or draft her own, whatever works, but we can certainly utilize that resource as well. So that was the intention of my original question.
Oh, perfect.
Awesome. Okay. We will coordinate with Michelle then. Thank you.
And Lou, I'm sorry, I know I don't personally have any good recommendations in terms of what you've proposed so far, but it's an uphill battle to say the least. I mean, you have community, the casinos are not always the driving factor anymore in terms of ridership, since they're changing so frequently. And but then you also have stations such as Egg Harbor City that are kind of going different direction in terms of how they're developing around their assets, with Wawas and other non-transit friendly sort of development. So I think I don't know. Best of luck.
This is Kathy. I had a question about the Atlantic City Rail Line. Do you have a breakout on the ridership, employees versus just regular travelers?
We might be able to see that when we, summarize, basically collect and then summarize all the results of our current travel survey. There hasn't been a travel survey for a while, and typically we ask, reason for travel. I don't recall offhand what the breakdown was last time, but last time was a while ago, and it probably wouldn't be relevant now. So I need to talk to our research folks. They're the ones who oversee those surveys. I just don't know when the data is going to be ready, but that's my long-winded way of saying we don't have it yet, but we will.
And as
I
we
think
noted, a lot of our work was our baseline was the pre-COVID. So some of the data we are working with is also a mixture of, before the pandemic started and then during the pandemic. So it's a little bit hard to, again, to see where you're going with that in the future.
I think as you move forward, it'll be a critical piece because it influences what options you would select.
No doubt. Any other questions?
I have a question, and you may have gone over it. Forgive me. I was on the phone for a bit. Did you look at Pomona Road in Galloway at all? I know there's been talk about future looking into a stop there, and there's been quite a bit of development both during COVID and now post-COVID. There's senior housing there, a large concentration, and there's a lot of commercial and some future development that may happen. At one time, there was an Amazon facility talked about, but that's since fallen through the cracks. But have you looked at that? Just curious. Again, I'm sorry if you
John,
already met.
yes, and in fact, we that is what we are actively looking at. The proposed station site, excuse me, is just geographically southeast of the Pomona Road grade crossing. What makes the location of a station there a little bit challenging is the proximity to the grade crossing. Think about if a train is stopping right next to the railroad crossing, the gates stay down. So some way to deal with that while the train is stopped would have to be addressed. It is also the end of one of those sidings, the locations where the trains pass each other. So there are railroad signals and a switch, and all that stuff gets affected if you put a station there. So it's being incorporated into the planning for that work. And as I had mentioned earlier, it's a jointly funded study between NJ Transit and SJTA. That work is ongoing, and it's a feasibility study.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that's all we have for that, Lou. We appreciate your time and everyone else for presenting. Will the slideshow for the transit planning, would you guys be able to share those?
Yes, definitely. I apologize.
I was going to say, I think I saw a 45-minute presentation on your website. Is that pretty much what you gave today?
Yeah, just about. But I can email a PDF version of it if that's helpful for the TAC.
Yeah, please share the slides. What I was going to ask
Okay.
our Melissa as well, our public outreach planner, is to see if she might be able to segment out our GoToMeeting recording and potentially make that available to others that may be interested either on the transit friendly planning piece or the Atlantic City rail line piece or even our project selection criteria. So if you have a PDF of your slides, that'd be helpful as well. And the same question, I guess, would be for Tom.
Yes, I think we can make that available.
Okay, you can send that directly to me and then we could work on circulating.
Okay, we'll do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I think
Well,
we're good. Thank you.
yeah, thank you, everyone. And if there's any thoughts or questions later on from anyone on TAC regarding the project selection criteria, feel free to reach out either via phone or email.
Jason, real quick on that project selection piece, what is your time frame on the next steps? I know you're going to be soliciting projects. I don't know if I heard you mention that earlier.
Yeah, we're going to be sending out the solicitation either this week or Monday of next week. And then we're going to also be putting together a timeline, so it kind of gives you a bigger picture of when we expect some of those milestones to occur. So. that yeah,
Jennifer.
final schedule. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Lou.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Jennifer, thank you for having us. I'm going to put Michael and Celeste on camera here. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are here in a conference room, which is why we're getting the feedback. Sorry about that. But I hope you found the presentations interesting, and have a good summer.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
guys.
everyone.